what's so interesting that you point out in your book, The Launching Years, is that you spell out the differences between junior year and senior year in college, and they're really quite dramatic. I actually had no idea the nuances between those years. And so what I thought we would do is kind of look into each year, because I think it's so different that it warrants a conversation, because a parent will be kind of doing different things during those years. So if you take junior year, if you actually take a kid, what are the kind of things that cause them anxiety or key stressors or concerns at that time?
Well, let's start with the good news on junior year.
Okay.
At about 16 and a half, there really is another transition from middle to late adolescence. And they really have sort of grown into their skin by then. They've been undergoing these changes since about age 11. And so they're 5 years into their new self. And often there's this relaxation, and we call it a rapprochement. I mean, they're sort of coming back to the parents. They get their sense of humor back. They might even walk with you, not just demand that you're 10 steps back. They might go to a movie with you. So the good news is there's usually a little bit more of a coming together in the parent-child relationship. Now, here are the challenges of the junior year, as you probably know. SATs, starting to think about college. If they're in a small school, they might be around a lot, in competitive school, they might be around a lot of people that are really getting high anxiety about college. And so the fact that things are getting serious and they need to start to anticipate the great beyond can really start to ratchet up the stress and some of the demands of those SATs and APs and all the rest. So this is what I call launch anxiety. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to write this book from the parent's point of view, or the parent's experience, is, and chronicle junior senior year, is that if you don't know what's about to come upon you and your family, you're going to be more stressed out. So the more you can naturally expect these stressors, the better.
Yeah, so all those different things. So it's like a standardized testing, and I've talked to my son, he's like, why do these things matter? And I'm like, I know, like, it shouldn't matter, but they do matter, and it's good to prep for them. It can make a difference. Like, why should I prep for them? All these different kinds of things. Or, what should we be looking for at college? And we've been driving all these different places and saying, well, here's the Northeast, here's the Southeast, here's the Midwest, because part of it is a regional thing, each with their own unique flavor. And you're going to have to decide whether it's a good fit, right? Because as you can see from when I read through your book, The Launching Years, and if it's not a good fit, they'll feel it in freshman year, and you're just trying to avoid that.
Exactly.
Their major decision feeling wrong. Yeah.
I see it sort of like a mating dance, that they're to visit colleges. And one of the things that's recommended is that you go to different types of schools. So you don't have to spend a lot of money and go to every single school you might think you might apply to a year and a half from now. You'll go to a large university, you'll go to a small liberal arts, you'll go to a less competitive or more competitive. Right. And so they get a flavor of what it feels like. It's much better than talking about it, just to go on a college tour, maybe take a sibling, maybe take a friend. The less stress you place on that experience of the college tour, the better. So, and when they say things like, oh, why does this test matter? They know why it matters. They're absorbing that from peers. And probably what we can do is try to de-stress, not amplify that. But a lot of parents know that this is called high stakes testing. And so we add to the anxiety. We don't diminish it. So that's part of our job.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was a huge insight in your book is that my son just took the ACT, and he's taking it early, but I figured, well, why not take it early?
Right.
So we'll know more about junior year and what schools are appropriate based on his scores versus just going to all these schools. But what was interesting is I had so much test anxiety myself that I was like, bringing that on to him. And one of the things that you bring out in your book is that if parents haven't figured out their own emotional baggage around these critical decisions, right? What did they do? What were their parents doing? Right. And what happened for you in test prep? You bring all that in, and I think torture your kids, right? For no particular reason aside from that you never resolved it yourself. That was one of the big Oh, yeah. I mean, I experienced that recently with the ACT going, wow, I got my own work to do because I just hoisted all this crap that was unnecessary on him.
Right, right. Well, in a wide angle lens, another really big incentive for me to write this book was they're not just the only one going through a developmental transition. We are too. We had, I think the college prep night, the college night at school is just fascinating from an anthropological point of view because there's childbirth education classes at the beginning of getting the baby, and then there's the college night, which is about the exit for the baby. And so it's even bigger than just college. It's this new transition that my child, my baby, is about to go to a new port, launch to a new port. It's the great unknown, and I am so attached to my baby. How is that baby going to do in the new world? So on a big level, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you said, it is high stakes when we put all our eggs into the basket of everything is going to depend on this school that accepts my child. It makes us very vulnerable. But again, emotions are contagious. We know that from brain scan research, that if my child is melting down, my brain is going to match his and I'm going to be melting down. So we really need to watch our boundaries and contain our anxiety so that we don't make things worse for them. And like you said, if we are first generation family sending a child to college, if I didn't do well in college, I'm going to have baggage around that. If I went to a super competitive one and he or she is not really engaged for that kind of environment, all those things play in to the equation.
Yeah, there were some really powerful stories, and in your book, one of the things I liked is that you actually had stories of vignettes of clients, probably compositions of clients that came in with certain kind of profiles, and you can just see how all of your personal baggage can really, really weigh in during that whole college area. Okay, so let's go back to junior year. So they have a confluence, like standardized testing, what kind of college tours, parents all of a sudden putting the screws on them, like, what are your grades doing, if they hadn't been already. What are some of the behaviors or what's happening on the kids' side of the equation during this pressure?
What we need to remember is, because parents are always referring to their kids not being motivated enough, or he doesn't get it, that making A's, the difference between A's and B's or B's and C's is everything, or how much they should study for SATs. And what parents need to remember is these teenagers are going through so much. They might be falling in love, out of love, feel like they're too fat, they're too short, that they don't have enough friends, they're not popular, deciding about substance use. They have more going on than just thinking about college. College just adds more pressure. But sometimes parents really do lose perspective on their social and emotional lives that mean a lot to them as well. Not that college doesn't. They get it. Most of them get it, especially if they're in competitive environments, or even the kids that are going to work afterwards, or maybe go to the military, or maybe go to community college. It's still very scary to be out on your own. But even that apart, they're undergoing all of the experience of adolescence. Self-doubt, wondering who they are, what kind of politics, religion, sexuality choices. But parents often just have tunnel vision because of our anxiety. They scope down. They say, what's the most important thing? College. Well, maybe the most important thing to our teenager is falling in love. And we say, oh, well, you can do that later. Don't bother with that. Don't bother with that. I say, go read Romeo and Juliet. It's the most intense feeling on the planet. So sometimes that tunnel vision is one of the worst things we can do as parents.
Right. So I guess the opposite, what a more informed thing to do is to recognize that they have lots of other things aside from this mono focus of college.
Exactly. Empathy.
Okay, got it. And so when you're kind of harping on college, they get it already, but what happens if they are, let's say that you have someone who's fallen in love or is exploring their gender or the host of other things that you mentioned. Right. How do you make sure that you attend to those emotional needs while at the same time making sure that they don't, they're on track for college?
Right. Well, you may not be able to control that. If you think about the brain, or what we're thinking about all day as being a pie diagram, if 90% of that is going into questioning their sexual identity or being madly in love and being about to be dumped, we can't talk them into focusing on the test tomorrow. That's not the way the limbic system, the emotional system of the brain works. I have a phrase I use over and over: you might be right, but are you effective? So we might that it matters to study for the
Right.
test. But if they're melting down over a love interest, then the most important thing we can do, and the most expedient, even to get back to that agenda, is to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Empathy for where they are. Trying to talk them out of their meltdown is never going to work.
Right.
So connection first and correction later, even if you're lucky to do anything on that score.
Yes, yes. It's hard to remember the connection and correction, but I think that until you have the connection, and if they're struggling with those kind of things, like you said, they're not going to listen to you. They don't care. Okay, so what? And going back to, so you actually have those issues that you're what that you talked about. Gender identification, love interests, social issues. During a junior year, how much should you get involved? Like, how much should you let them solve the problem on their own, and how much should you get involved? That's always the hardest dance that you do as a parent.
Right. I think it really depends on your child and what you know about your child. If they have a track record of high competence, they come home sober, they come home at their curfew, they make good grades, they know how to be self-managers on their grades, and they encounter a mistake, you probably do want to err on the side of let them solve it. Like they're in trouble with their employer, or they're in trouble with a teacher because they did some prank and they're in trouble at school. You probably want to let them handle it. On the other hand, if you've got more of a mid-range child who, ADHD, basically gets into all kind of scrambles because he's a little less mature with his prefrontal cortex growing or whatever, then it can be very helpful to intervene. I had a story last year. It was just a perfect example of this. The child went to college and he lent $500 that he had earned during the summer that was supposed to last him at least one semester. He lent it to his roommate. His roommate used it for gambling. By the way, college, they do a lot of online gambling all night long. Right. Be aware. And so he had spent all the money, and then the roommate had, and then he didn't have any left. So in that case, he was having a meltdown. He finally called the parents, and the parents really helped him out. What they did is they devised this little strategy, and this kid would never have thought of this on his own, this college freshman, to have the parents be very angry in an email about, if you don't get that money back, we're going to go to his parents, we're going to go to the dean. So then the roommates could say, oh boy, those parents are really hot on the cow. And then they'd incentivize the roommate who owed him the $500 to have his own scam. I think he said he lost the TV and his parents forwarded the money, but at least it solved the problem. Right. I'm so glad the parents helped him with that mistake.
Right.
He learned from it, and the parents helped him out. He had to sort of, work with the collaboration with the roommate, but he needed that. And then an extreme example would be a kid that, develops an eating disorder or depression or anxiety, and then full out rescue is required. So those are the stories I tell in the book so that can make a discernment about when do I and when do I not.
Yeah, it's interesting. If I look at those two outlier cases, one is when, maybe the person's mental capacity isn't functioning, and so their judgment is actually being, hampered by whatever chemicals are going on in their brain. So that would be one. And then the second outlier seems to be, there are going to be situations that they just don't have relevant life experience. So expecting them to solve that problem on their own is not like a realistic thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
but
that's the kind of parent you want to be. You want to, when you send them off, you want to say, you be enthusiastic and optimistic, but say, hey, but it's like any other life phase. You might get into some scrapes. I'm here for you. Right? Yeah. The other thing I always recommend to parents is always say, most kids get stressed out. That's what the research shows in college. So that's what that counseling center is there for. You're never perfect physically. You have a virus, you have, a hearing problem. Well, you're never going to be perfect emotionally, and that student activity fee goes toward, or the tuition goes toward that counseling center. That's what it's there for. You get stressed out, take a hike. Over to the counseling center. So if parents don't help a child remove some of that stigma, they're sort of looking a gift horse in the mouth. That counseling center is there for them.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I don't think I would have thought about mentioning that to my son or daughter, but I think that would actually be really critical. Okay, so, all right, senior year.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show, and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.